I wanted to go over a better understanding of the power dynamics within the Islamic Republic and the four different groups that are exist and the competition between them. Okay, so I created these visuals for you guys to make it easier to go through them. So it says a fractured crown. Again, I know crown is probably not what we want to associate with the Islamic Republic, but ignore that part. And also, wherever it says Iran, just read that as the Islamic Republics. Okay. So the fractured crown, the Iran security state in transition. Okay. Okay. So there's some parts of it that are obvious, but I promise, like you guys already know because you've been following this, but it gets very interesting as we move along, okay? Because there's a new categorization that is very fun, okay? So as you guys know, the death of Ali Khamenei leaves an unseen heir. So the consequences, the absence of a visible, active central arbiter has dissolved the old centralized model, forcing power downward into a deeply opaque militarized order. So we already talked about the shifting of power from the turbans to the boots, from the mullahs to the IRGC leaders, and that was already happening. But now, because Mojtaba is nowhere and nowhere to be seen, that is happening a lot faster. Okay, so the void, Mojtaba Khamenei technically holds the position of supreme leader. However, he remains entirely unseen and refuses to actively arbitrate. I don't know how to pronounce it. Arbitrate? Yeah, arbitrate state disputes in the manner of his father. But here's the thing: even if he was around, he wasn't as charismatic as his father. He hasn't been seen ever making any statements except one video where he was canceling his Islamic courses. Other than that, there's no voice or video of him. So he hasn't been in the public eye. So even if he was healthy, alive, and living and in front of the cameras right now, he wouldn't be as effective as his father. But now things are escalating because he's not even. We don't even know if he's alive or if his face is intact, if he has his legs, if he's in a coma. We don't know. So this is escalating this issue. So that what that does is basically it speeds up the process that we have already been talking about. So power has migrated from a centralized figure to an opaque military apparatus. So the IRGC military order is basically was around the supreme leader, but now it used to take command and it used to be or something that orbits around the supreme leader and the direction that it gives. But now, because of that central command is not there, is everything is begins moving more and more the leadership towards the IRGC. So the Islamic Republic is no longer a top-down theocracy. I keep using this word that is a tongue twister for me. Arbitrated, yes, arbitrated by a single cleric. It is a militarized a security state dominated by the IRGC. So all the state's functions, including the presidency, the parliament, the judiciary, all of it is under IRGC control. So we have the civilian governance is completely paralyzed by a structural military veto. This was already the civilian governance was always already weak and under the control of the supreme leader, but now it's under the control of the military. Okay, so we have the deadlock. President Masoud Pezeshkian faces a complete political deadlock. The IRGC has aggressively assumed control over key state functions, and the veto we have, rather than governing alongside the presidency, the military apparatus systematically blocks civilian appointments and restricts executive authority, rendering the visible government largely powerless. So you guys mostly already knew this. Okay, but so the left side of the slide you already know this, but the right side is now getting more interesting. Okay, so the Western moderate versus hardliner binary obscures the actual mechanics of state survival. So this is the left side is false, basically moderate versus hardliner, saying analyzing Iran through a reformist versus authoritarian lens fails to explain current behavior. So this is the new paradigm. The system is not divided by ideology. By the way, this seems to contradict what we have said before, but I'll explain here. So the system is not divided by ideology, but by overlapping factions competing fiercely over the tactics required to preserve the exact same Islamic Republic. So I would actually say this is correct. Even though the different factions seem to have somewhat of a different ideology, but that's the appearance of it. The ideology, the differences between their ideology is a tool for them to gain leverage over the other factions. But basically, the main thing that is happening is a power struggle rather than ideological differences. The ideological differences are used to gain relevance, especially by the Paidari camp, right? But it's more of a power competition than an insistence that our ideology is correct. So this is the interesting part. The four competing circles of the new Iranian power structure. Again, when it says Iranian, just say Islamic Republic. So we have the intelligence security network is the first one. The second one is the negotiation facing track, and then we have the coercive military core, and then the last one is the ideological pressure camp. Okay, so the intelligence security network, that the key figures there are Mojtaba Khamenei and Hossein Taeb. So the power base for that is the deep-rooted trust built over decades that people have for for their institutions, especially the Beit Rahbari or the Office of the Supreme Leadership. So their survival tactic is deep unseen control. Usually they like to have control from behind the scenes, from behind the curtains. So their stance on the U.S. talks is you have the behind the scenes manipulation. You have no clear messaging from them, right? So they control things from behind the scenes, right? And then we have, and basically, guys, this group you might think that the stance will be completely against the negotiations, but that's actually not the case. This faction actually is more flexible. It's not as flexible as the second faction here, but it is more flexible than number 3 and number 4, right? And then we have the second faction, which is the negotiation facing track. This is like Pezeshkian, Ghalibaf, Araghchi. Something recently has changed from in the Araghchi. Araghchi has changed the camps recently from the second to the third one. So Araghchi is put in the second one, but he's now moving to the third camp, right? Which I will get to. So power base is presidency, parliament, but also when it comes to Ghalibaf, you also have to include his IRGC credentials and connections as the power base as well. So the survival tactic is tactical diplomacy within regime logic. So there are some red lines that they will not cross. It's not like they are as flexible as the former reformers like the Rouhani and Khatami type of people. And then we have their stance on the talks is basically open to tactical deals. There are some red lines that they will not cross, but they want more flexibility than anyone else in this chart, right? In this table, sorry. So then we have the military core, and the key figures in that is Ahmed Vahidi, but I would also add Zolgadr here as well, Zolgadr and Vahidi. So power base is that basically IRGC military might, very straightforward. The survival tactic is absolute veto and blunt force. And basically their position right now on the US talks is that it's basically explicitly forbidden, or even if they, to be more accurate, that even if they want to do some talks, it shouldn't be about the missiles or the nuclear. It should be based on when would the US remove the sanctions and when would they get out of the region completely. It should be based on that, which is delusional, but that's their stance, right? And the last one is the one that many people are ignoring, but they're becoming more and more important. They were always important, but now because of the street protests, they're becoming more important. Is the ideological pressure camp. The main key figure here is Saeed Jalili, but I would include all of the people from the Paidari camp over here, like Nabavian and like Sabati and other politicians from this camp. And the power base, so these people have basically very little military power, but they have the hardline media and pure ideology as their power base, and their survival tactic is purity and the absolute refusal to capitulate or bend the knee. By the way, guys, are you finding this helpful? Let me know.
Yes.
And also, their stance on U.S. talks is that it's absolute treason, and that they accuse anybody who talks about this as being spies, Zionist spies, or part of with the enemy or stuff like that. Okay. So diplomatic
Go back
initiatives
one
are
second. Can you elaborate on what survival tactic means, that column?
it's basically the way that they try to keep themselves relevant and basically survive the other people within this table, right? Everybody is trying to have the upper hand and basically eliminate other people or reduce their powers. So what is their leverage? What is how do they, so the power base is the source of their influence, and the survival tactic is basically how they use that power. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. So yeah, because here's the thing: a lot of people think like these people are against the United States and Israel, but they don't also notice that the main fight that these people are fighting is against each other, right? These people are fighting against each other, and that's the fight that a lot of people are ignoring, right? And oh, thank you, Jeffrey. All right, so diplomatic initiatives are tightly restricted by the coercive military core. So the Islamabad talks, as we talked about. By the way, we're going to get to the Araghchi part, which is very interesting, shows the shift in power. But let's go over some of the stuff that you guys mostly already know. So regarding the Islamabad talks, we had deep structural divisions emerge during the indirect negotiations with the U.S. So we had an intervention by the IRGC commander Ahmed Vahidi. So Ahmed Vahidi, as you guys know, is the head of the IRGC. So we had the so IRGC Ahmed Vahidi and the military corps intervened to severely restrict the authority of the negotiators, and that's basically the parliament speaker Ghalibaf and the foreign minister Araghchi. So what was the red line? Red line. So Vahidi explicitly forbade the negotiation track from holding any talks regarding Iran's missile program or nuclear issues. So here's the Araghchi part, I think. Is that part? Yeah, okay, let me see if that's the part. Civilian alliance fracture over perceived allegiance to the military core. So if we go back a few slides, can we go back? Yes. If we go back a few slides, you could see that we had Araghchi as part of the negotiating facing team, right? But Araghchi, but among that team, Araghchi is basically abandoning them and joining the IRGC camp, right? So on the negotiation track, we had basically Pezeshkian, the President Pezeshkian, and the Speaker of the Parliament, Ghalibaf, and the Foreign Minister Araghchi basically left them and is now loyal to Vahidi. And by the way, guys, this was announced after we here mentioned that it seems like that's what's happening. Remember, I mentioned here and the live show that it seems like Araghchi has a new boss. And this was not confirmed anywhere. I was just saying, based on his behavior and based on what makes sense for Araghchi, I think Araghchi has a new boss, and his new boss is Vahidi. And now we finally got confirmation that I was right about that. I'm actually impressed by my guess. So I hope you guys are impressed as well. Right? Okay. All right. So the diplomatic rift has widened into an internal purge, causing the negotiation track to turn on its own members. So this is what's happening. This is the allegation. President Pezeshkian and the Speaker and Ghalibaf, Speaker of the House, Speaker of the Parliament Ghalibaf, are reportedly seeking the immediate removal of Foreign Minister Araghchi. So what is the betrayal? The Araghchi is accused of acting entirely as an aid to as basically as working for IRGC's Vahidi, prioritizing military directives over representing the presidency. So remember, Araghchi, as the foreign minister, he's a minister. He's supposed to be loyal. He's supposed to be following the directives of the president, but that has never been the case. In the Islamic Republic, the foreign minister has always been approved by the supreme leader and gets direct orders from the supreme leader, even though he's supposed to be part of the cabinet of the president. But so that part is not new. But now, instead of being loyal to the supreme leader or the president or Ghalibov, as it seemed to be the case during the negotiations, now it seems like he's now just taking orders from Vahidi. So it gets even more interesting because I want us to start examining what's happening within the Islamic Republic from a new lens, because we have been looking at all of this division as weakness. So it helps to actually consider the other side of this. Maybe all of this is not actually a weakness. Let's also consider what is the benefit of all of this to the Islamic Republic. Okay, so let me make my case for that. So, ideological warfare erupts publicly in state sanctioned media. The internal disputes over survival tactics have spilled into a public battle between state aligned media outlets. Okay, so we already saw this a few days ago where I showed you the graffitis. Let me see if I have that, because it would be good for to have that ready. But okay, so let me explain this, and then if I could find the graffitis, I will show that to you guys, right? So we had Tasnim, which is IRGC linked media and in Iran. And remember, just because we say IRGC, it doesn't mean that it represents all of IRGC, right? It could represent segments of IRGC. But This was incredible because Tasnim basically published something openly mocking the maximalist ideological demands of the Jalili camp as fantasy, labeling them as magic beans talk. Okay, so basically saying fantasy. But what this slide is not capturing is that the 10-point framework was was said to also be approved by Mujtaba. So Tasnim publishing that was kind of radical move by them, right? And then Jalili, you guys remember, was from the fourth ideological camp, from the Paidari camp. Okay. And then we have Raja News, which is more Jalili aligned, more aligned with the Paidari camp, with the people in the fourth track. So they retaliated by accusing the pragmatists and the military and the negotiators. I don't think you should put military negotiators and the negotiators of actively undermining the supreme leader's established red lines, the 10-point framework. So both were accusing each other of treason and working with the enemy. So Tasnim's argument, so Raja's argument that Tasnim is the enemy is because they were mocking the supreme leader's 10-point framework, and Tasnim was accusing Raja of them working with the enemy because their attacks was causing division within the regime, and it's the enemy that was to cause division within the Islamic Republic, and therefore these people. And also, by the way, Tasnim, their response was very radical to Raja's attack, to Raja attacking them, because it reminded in the response they reminded that the people are being arrested for basically causing division within the Islamic Republic. So that was an open threat by Tasnim, which is IRGC linked, against the Jalili camp, saying that we might actually come and hunt you then and arrest you. So that is a huge level of escalation. I haven't seen that was like a passive. It wasn't a direct threat that we're going to come arrest you, but in the response mentioning that, by the way, people are being arrested for treason, was basically a passive way of threatening the Raja people. So let me see if I could really quickly find the. I don't have the the graffiti, but what happened was that the more Jalili aligned people, they came to Tasnim's headquarters and on they put graffiti on the walls of on the walls of the building for Tasnim, and they also had signs that they put on the door, and they were basically saying that, basically accused Tasnim of insulting the supreme leader, saying that is our red line. The people who are doing that are basically causing division. And they also said magic beans equals the delusion of negotiation, basically saying for we're not delusional for having these red lines when it comes to negotiating with the Americans. You're delusional for thinking that you could even negotiate with the Americans, right? So let's actually get to how this might be a strength rather than a weakness for the Islamic Republic. Okay. And I'm not saying that's the case, but it's important for us to consider the other side as well, the other side of this argument as well. Okay. So, one argument that I'm seeing is that the regime engineers internal friction into diplomatic and domestic leverage. Okay, so how? Like, how are they? You think division is bad, but some people argue that actually the Islamic Republic weaponizes the division. Okay, so they weaponize the rift. Okay, so the public clashes are highly functional. By projecting a threat of internal collapse, the regime forces favorable choices from its adversaries and its public. So we have the Iranian citizens and then we have the foreign diplomats. By showing that we have divisions within the Islamic Republic, what they're doing is that they extract concessions by presenting a false urgency to empower the moderates. They're like, oh, look at these crazy people. Our hands are tied. You have to basically give us more concessions because we want to be more flexible, but we can't because of these crazy radicals. And you need to be more flexible because if you don't pick us, you have to deal with these crazy people. So you actually have to be more flexible to us so that you don't give these crazy people an upper hand. So because it's a pick me strategy, right? And also be like more flexible with us. Don't demand so much, right? And it's also the same thing to the Iranian citizens. basically giving them there's a two paths to them. Basically, one path is bad and you don't like it, but the other option is worse. But by the way, this is a strategy that the Islamic Republic has used for Iranian people for so long. But now, instead of using Rouhani and Zarif on one side and the rest of the regime on one side, they're basically splitting the hardliners into, and basically making the Iranian people wanting to tell Iranian people to choose between bad and worse among even the hardliners, right? So basically, it's the citizens trap, enforces domestic compliance by framing the alternative to the current state as apocalyptic extremism, and like at least people like Ghalibaf might be a little bit more pragmatic, right? So debate over tactics mask. So this is what the argument is like: the debate over the tactics mask a unified strategy for absolute control. So you might say that one side is diplomacy and negotiation, the other one is focusing on escalation and ideological, and this is a tactical illusion. The visible infighting over missile talks, cabinet basically ousting, and media narratives is real, but it is not a battle between democratic reform and authoritarianism. So what is actually happening, these are strictly debates over the method of the regime survival, whether the chosen path is temporary diplomacy or ideological escalation. The ultimate goal is identical. So that's what we have to understand, that there's the end result is going to be the same with both of these people. It's basically a disagreement over the strategy for survival. So the enduring reality is a militarized, unaccountable security state. Despite the shifting names, the unseen leader, and the intense public infighting, the core machinery of the Islamic Republic remains completely intact and unaccountable to the Iranian people. So these are the three pillars that are still there: absolute control over war and security, that's pillar one; pillar two, absolute control over the national economy; and pillar three, unchecked authority for the violent repression of civil society. And that is not changing. All right, this is my TED talk and I'm done. Sorry if I went for too long. Oh, thank you,
Is there
thank you,
any way
thank you.
to post those slides somewhere?
Oh, okay, maybe I could do that.
Yeah, I would definitely look at them again a couple more times.
Okay, okay. Oh, okay. Really? Was it that good? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, let
I
me
have
actually
a bunch of
share this.
responses. So let's go to Ali first.
That slide that was about you put a table and there were the four groups, the four camps. I think you should
Mhm.
definitely put that one on the stream, bring that up on stream, because I think that's the
Okay.
easiest. It's like the most easily visualizing thing that people can see to try to be like, oh, there's four different groups in the regime and they're all trying to vie for power.
Save it with your other bingo card.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that one was like
Okay.
the best slide. Anyone should be able to understand that one. It's like it's the easiest one.
Okay.
Okay. A sketch.
So this, I agree with what Ali said. The bingo card combined with that would be like a good visual aid, and also show that these guys are infighting for power. They're not fighting for power, because basically some of them are saying, "Oh, if we cause this apocalyptic stuff, the Mahdi will come back and we'll have a new era, right?" And some are saying, "No, we're not doing nowhere nearly enough to get him to come back. We're just wasting our life and power here. We got to be more strategic." That's kind of like the ideological fight for those who actually believe. And then there's the pragmatists that say, kind of like with the other stuff. Am I getting that kind of right? Because I believe some of these people don't even really believe, right? They just want power. But if I'm going to go through the hardcore, like some of them are like, we are definitely have to keep fighting because we're going to make this guy come back. And then some other ones are like, no, we're not doing nearly enough. It's better for us to bide our time, get some more power, and do something crazy later. And that's how they're trying to fight within their camps, because I think the camps are going to be more ideologically driven than the leadership, because I heard that they were doing graffiti on each other's news stations. It's like CNN, Fox turf wars, like in Anchorman. They're going at it. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if you ever seen that movie. Great movie. You should see it. but
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Am I kind of close to it? I
Wait, can you simplify the question here, because I want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
Okay, so within the hardliners that are ideologically driven, not the leadership, I'm talking the camps. You're saying, okay, we're playing kind of good cop, bad cop. I'm holding these guys back. These guys that I'm holding back, these people that actually believe. There's two camps in the true believers. There's some true believers that say, yeah, we can't give up some stuff, but we definitely don't want to go all out now because we're not doing enough to bring the Mahdi. And some other people are saying, no, this is it. This is the moment where the Mahdi comes. Is that kind of like an ideological division among the true believers?
Okay, so are you talking about the Paidari camp? Are you talking about the Jalili camp? If there's a division among them based on who's a
On
true
strategy.
believer and who's
on strategy
So-
no, they're both true believers, but on the strategy. Again, we gotta hold back because now is not the time, right? And another camp of true believers is like, I know they're all hardliners, they just divided on strategy, right?
Can I
Yeah,
try to
so-
explain something? It's the ideological thing is the base where the group is formed. Now the group is like a gang. Okay, somebody's sitting on the top, the higher one right now because people are dead,
No,
right?
no,
So sitting on the
hold
top,
on. Let
and
me
you
let
need
me
to lead
explain.
people.
Okay, let me explain. Okay, so here's the thing: when it comes to who is a true believer and who's really not a true believer, you can't really tell. Okay, somebody could be not a true believer, but within the most extremist camp, and a really true believer and within the extremist camp, and somebody could be a true believer in the more pragmatic camp and not a true believer within the pragmatic camp. So the way we're dividing these people is based on strategy, because we can't read their mind, right? I could guess that maybe Ghalibaf is less of a true believer because of some of his history, but I can't know. Maybe he thinks it was justified, right? So I think it doesn't make sense for us to. I'm pretty sure there's a mix of both of them, people who are truly believers and people in all of these camps. There's a mix of people who are true believers and people who are less believers and just using all of this ideology as a tool. So the way we're dividing them is based on tactics and what they say they believe, rather than genuinely what they believe. Because guessing that is, what's the point of guessing that? We can't read people's minds, right? So when I say some people are more revolutionary, Mahdi oriented, end of times narrative, that's what they say they believe, and they are less flexible and they're more radical and they use that strategy to gain more control. And the people who are a bit more flexible and pragmatic, that's the tools that they use and that's what they say they believe, right? We're just observing what is observable. But I personally think that most people, even if they're most people end up believing the things that are beneficial to them, right? It's not, even if you think somebody's lying, they first convince themselves before they try to lie to other people, because it's just much less exhausting and much more efficient. And just the humans have naturally the ability to just make themselves agree with what they're saying to other people. So who said this? Before lying to other people, just lie to yourself, make yourself believe a lie so that you become a. But people don't have to convince themselves of doing that. It's just naturally people would lean into believing the BS that they're giving to people, so it becomes easier to give that. It's less taxing on the mind. So I'm not saying it's the same case is the case with everybody, but if I had to bet, even though you could see that the ideology and the method that somebody is advocating for is actually the same ideology and methods that is in line with their interests and what brings them power. So you might think, therefore, they don't believe in it, because what is a coincidence? Well, that seems like a big coincidence. Like, why don't you believe the things that would be harmful to your position? But even that's the case, I do think that no, most of these people actually believe what they say what they believe. Does that make sense?
My question wasn't about what they actually think. It's what they profess. They profess this is a better tactic for our religious goal, and other people will profess no, the tactic for our religious goal is to go hard now. Is that what I'm getting? Even within the media, I'm also talking about the news.
So for these people, I know you know this, but I just want to clarify: the religious goal and the political goal is the same thing, right? Because the whole point of politics is to maintain Islamic rule, and Islamic rule is a religious duty. So what they profess is there is no, this is our political goal, these are our religious goals. They basically are the same thing, right? So the difference is that, I don't know if I'm answering your question, is that the more radical Mehdi revolution oriented, they have these principles that you should not be violating. For example, talking to the enemy, betraying the blood of the martyrs, the Islamic principles, and all of this, that hijab, like enforcing hijab and everything like that. But the other side is more like, yeah, we need Islamic rule, but we cannot have Islamic rule if we're dead. If the Islamic Republic falls, the economy matters. Making oil revenue matters. Being a little bit flexible to the people who are actually a big power. These people, the Americans and Israelis, they're not as insignificant as you think. They actually have big militaries, and we cannot just continue fighting with them. Okay, so yeah, we might want to kill them all one day, but now is not the time, right? We have to kill them another day, because now we are not in a position to actually annihilate Israel and United States. Okay, we want Islamic rule, but we need to be pragmatic about one day we will bring down the American empire. But today is not that day. Today we have to focus on surviving so that we could get to the position where we have that ability. So does that make more sense? Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're breaking the rules by just talking, and they're like focused on no, that's against the rules, and that's they're like, "Oh, what are you doing? You're breaking the rules. That's the whole reason we're here." They're like more like rules. You can't talk to the Americans. That's against the rules. That kind of thing. That's kind of like what you said. Right?
Yeah, it's against the rules because they just killed the supreme leader. They just killed the supreme leader while they were talking about negotiations. They're like, the enemies of Islam are humiliating you. They just came and killed the supreme leader. We haven't even yet begun to take their revenge for them killing Qasem Soleimani. Now you want to go talk and capitulate and negotiate with the people who have proven to backstab you every time that you want to talk to them. They come and attack you. Like, how ridiculous is that? The Americans don't from their perspective, the Americans understand nothing other than military force. The negotiation table is where we lose.
Yeah, they're not that self-deluded about their wins. They're like, no, we're not winning. We got to go get revenge. We're not going to sit down and talk to these people. You may say you're winning, but we know what just happened. They just killed our guy. We can't just sit down and talk to these people because you're telling everyone we're winning, but we don't really believe it. They killed our guy.
They killed our guy, and we need to get revenge. And you say, oh, they're strong, so let's talk to them so that we could do a ceasefire. They're like, you're retarded, because they attack us every time we talk to them. So I think that actually the radical side has a point. They're like,
more realistic.
yeah, the radical side actually has a point here, because they take the other pragmatic side. They're like, you guys say we're pragmatic. You're not being pragmatic. You say, let's go talk to them so that they don't attack us. They attacked us every time we went and talked to them. So we might as well keep fighting. They have a point, to be fair on that part, right? They're like, every time they attacked us, it was in the middle of the negotiations. So what's the point of even talking to them? Oh, also, by the way, I found the graffitis that I was talking about. So this is the camp associated with the Jalili, the Paidari camp. They went to Tasnim. So here you could see they say Milak Wahdat Shekani Tawhid be Rahbari, which means that the indicator of who's causing division is the people who are insulting the supreme leader. So basically, because Tasnim said that the 10-point framework was magic bean, so they considered that to be an insult to the supreme leader. And they also, and underneath they said Lubiyas Haramiz equals Tawahum Muzakere, which means that the magic beans equal the delusion of negotiations. And then here we have somebody holding a sign. So guys, these are attacks against the IRGC. These are pro-regime protesters holding signs against the Tasnim, which is an IRGC linked media. This is not against the reformers or the anti-regime people. This is a sign by pro-regime people against pro-regime people. So this one says Lubiyas Ehrami و قاحت برخی از مسئولین است نه شروط دهگانه رهبری. So saying that what is magic beans is the rudeness and the audacity of some of the officials, not the red lines of the supreme leader. There you go. All right.
Okay. Next person is Jeffrey.
That was a really good presentation. I don't know if you could put up the fourth one that had all the different the four different groups. So what's one of the main utilities I think that I drew from it? It provides a visual framework to push back or debunk the misconception that differences in tactics held amongst the different elements of the regime remnants somehow equates to differences in strategic goals, the strategic goal of the regime as a whole. And that's the possibility or probability later on. You actually mentioned this in the other slide, following slide, like close to the end, that regime remnants are co-opting that misconception and presenting it at what might be called controlled disorganization in the pursuit of two goals. One is to whitewash failure to adhere to agreements they make with, say, President Trump and or the Western Alliance in the hopes of escaping punitive action for said failure. Reid will bomb the shit out of you. And the other one is to prolong the diplomatic process to run out the clock in the hopes that then they can escape being wiped out. I got a question for you. If you can go back to that one slide, I don't know if you could put it up because it's really, I had to go back to with the back, that one right there. So what jumped out between the coercive and the ideological pressure, where would you place the Basiji in those two groups? Because they're kind of like, I know the Basij are very much in many ways within IRGC organization and or parallel to it. That said, they got kids brainwashed from birth, so there's a stronger ideological element to it. Where would you place them? And then I'm
So
gonna
the Basij is part of the IRGC, right?
no, I know that. I'm just saying, given
so
their
you might
ideological background,
yeah,
would you
so I know that's what I was going to continue. So I was just saying you're right that the Basij is part of the IRGC, but I think like when it comes to ideologically, they're a mix between 1, 3, and 4, right? So depends on the specific Basij you're talking to. So you have many people who are entire loyalty to the Islamic Republic is because of their loyalty to the supreme leader, which was Ali Khamenei. So I think that has now been reduced because Mojtaba would not be as effective as Ali Khamenei, but obviously many Basijis will see now themselves as loyal to Mojtaba. So that would be the first camp. And then many people within the Basij, especially the higher people in command, the people within the Basij, they will be from the third camp because they see themselves as working for the IRGC, so they will be consider themselves to be loyal to the IRGC. And obviously, the Basij is one of the most extremely ideological parts of the Islamic Republic. So you could find many people within the Basij to also be part of the last camp. So I would say it's a mix.
So this is the reason why I asked. In response to the competitive adaptation that in balloon effect regarding the regime trying to the possibility that probably the regime remnants co-opting the misconception that we talked about is the reason why I and other hawks were pushing for mass strikes against the IRDC leadership all the way down to lieutenants. So when you're dealing with the balloon effect, put the squeeze here, we have to I just say pop the balloon. Pop the balloon. There comes risk with that. There's a reason I was asking. That was actually really well done, Armin.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, next, Jim.
Yeah, I really appreciate, Armin, you showing us all that chart because it cleared a lot of confusion that I had about who is ideologically drawn to what in the regime itself. And the reason I say that is I want the Islamic Republic to be in the same place that Hitler and the Third Reich were at the end of the Second World War. It's cliche to bring up Hitler in today's politics, but I think it really matters because this is what I call the Hitler effect if we get the most incompetent shit to rise to the top of the leadership. Because with the example of Hitler at the end of the war, he was diverting resources that Germany should not have been devoting to at the end. He was overriding his generals, and he was even killing his best generals, such as Erwin Rommel at the end of the war out of paranoia. So the Allies, even though they initially thought, hey, we want to assassinate him to get better or worse leadership in there, they actually figured, no, he's doing a good enough job of destroying the country in the warpath, best to leave him in charge. So my question to you, Armin, is how could we engineer the worst and most incompetent of the Islamic Republic to go to the top? Because my gut feeling is we would want to target Mojtaba and we would want to target Krasinskian and Goluboff in the negotiating table, like in the parliamentary side, and have Vahidi and Jalili being the most aggressive, militant, unnegotiable parties there to be in charge. I think that will hasten the Republic's downfall even faster. I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that, of what I call the Hitler effect there.
So that is true. I would go with Mojtaba as well, because Mojtaba is not a big deal right now, right? And that's why I would kill him. Because if it was a big deal, you might think keep him in charge because he's like delusional and more extreme and ideological than maybe, I don't know, somebody like Ghalibaf. So you might think keep him in charge so that if the Islamic Republic is weaker. But Mojtaba is not very influential at all. Like he's a puppet of the IRGC right now, and killing him really demotivates and humiliates the Islamic Republic, because I don't know, it would be like a 2-month supreme leadership that's like funny, right? And it's funny. It's important for it to be funny because it humiliates the Islamic Republic. So have 2 months of supreme leadership, right? So I would say take him out. And I see what your point is, but I actually would be in favor of just taking them all out. Like, why spare any of these people, right? I think as bad as it would be for them to have the more delusional people in charge, it would be actually worse if none of these people were living. That would be even worse for the Islamic Republic. So why spare any of them?
Yeah, true. You got a good point there. I was just curious. That's more of a conservative position I had.
Right.
Just because if we had to live with somebody in charge, the last thing I want to see happen is, let's say Prziskin, let's say Mojtaba's cronies going to the negotiating table, negotiating peace with the U.S., saying, yeah, we'll let you come in, we'll let you take our uranium, we'll let you do inspections and whatever else you want, only to survive and build back up the force later. But that's the last thing I'd want to have happen. But
that wouldn't be as bad as you think, because that would humiliate we don't have just the Islamic Republic as a problem, okay? We also have the pro-regime Iranians as a problem, okay? So going through a transitional period where we have some people surrendering to the Americans is really a kick in the nuts to the pro-regime people, right? And we can't kill the pro-regime people because they're civilians and they're 5% of the country, right? So it does help if we go through a period of humiliation, because when it comes to the Islamic Republic, I say blow them up, kill all of them, right? But when it comes to the pro-regime people, we need to take their hope away from them. We need to watch the regime people take away all of their all their motivation, all of their hopes, all of their dreams, to demonstrate that it wasn't us who took that all away from them. It was the very people that they put in charge that took that away from them. And that level of humiliation might be essential for them to be less of a problem once the Islamic Republic is over. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, no, I see what you mean. Once you divide the few supporters of the regime from the actual regime itself, yeah, they have no long-term support. And sure, they could rule through military might. Sure, they could get some money through economic planning if the Americans come in. But no, I see where you're going with that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. At the end of the day, if the Islamic Republic falls, we can't be like too picky. I wish if it felt that way instead of that way. So we were going to be more than happy if it falls, right? So one way or another.
Yeah, the thing I was most concerned about is them somehow surviving, whether it's through blunt military force, which is less likely, or the other way.
I don't think they
either
would be
way,
able to survive. I don't
Yeah.
think it would be able to survive an absolute surrender. I think that they would lose so much support from the pro-regime people that I don't know how long it will take, but it's a really unstable situation for the regime to basically have close to 0% support.
Yeah, true. And the fact that their money is running out from the blockade, that is just a ticking time bomb for them to do something and resolve this, which they can't do. So we'll see if the clock eats them in the end there.
Okay, one more response from the gel, and then we gotta move on.
Yeah, I just wanted to back up what Tim was saying about Hitler and his that it was basically they basically best to keep him in charge because he was fucking things up.
Nigel, you're cutting in and out today. Last time you were so good with your audio, but can you
Oh.
fix the cutting in and out? Good like that.
Can you hear me at all now?
Yes, that's good now. I think it's better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, what I was saying was I just wanted to agree with Jim about what he said about Hitler and how he was determined to just leave him in charge because he was fucking shit up all by himself. It's true. A lot of people psychological profile of him over several years. He was a meth head. He had syphilis. He was making all sorts of bad decisions. He refused to let his generals fight the war for him. He became very micromanaging, and he was just making bad decision after bad decision. And so people actually decide, you know what, like instead of getting rid of him and letting somebody else take over, why don't we just let the retard stay in there instead of taking a risk with somebody else? Himmler, for example, who, as crazy as he was, actually a fucking genius and was much more efficient than Hitler. And if he had replaced Hitler, he may have made some better decisions than he did, which would have been strategically bad for us. So yeah, I think it actually was better to leave him in charge for our interest. I think that was the right call. I just want to say that.
Interesting.